as well, the little shell outline that we'll use. Yeah, it's on Twin. It's on Twin. I think it's in the class 3 folder, class 4 folder. It's course materials. Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen while I... yeah, if you can see my screen, it's in CBC Session 3 Analysis is where you'll find it, or CBC or CBS, either way. And then if you're calling in, can you just send me an email letting me know who it is, just so I know, just for tracking purposes. Okay, good. You found it. Good. I'll give people a few minutes to join, so I'll probably get started in a couple of minutes. We'll get started in a couple minutes, but feel free to download the materials from the Twin page. They're in CBC Session 3 folder, Analysis. There's a CommLaw essay, the CommLaw outline, and there's also a copy of the PDF. A copy of the PDF of the presentation. All right, I'm going to just go ahead and kind of get started with a little bit of review of what I covered in the last session. So tonight we're going to talk about analysis. The reason that this is obviously really important is this is the crux of where you get your points. I'll make it so you guys can see me, but I'm a little sick, so don't judge. So we're going to talk about analysis tonight. This is really where all the points are. Obviously, all of the the other sessions we talked about are the previous session, and if I had you in pre-bar, we talked a lot about organization as well. Organization is key, structure is key, really because it helps your analysis jump off the page. But all of the points are really earned in the analysis. It's when we are going through bar essays and reading them, the thing that I'm looking for is I'm hoping that an essay is well organized, well structured, just so that I really can just sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second there. When going through and when reading a bar essay, bar exam, it's if something is well organized, your analysis jumps off the page. So then, your rules become less important. Not that you don't need to know your rules and have precise rules, but really it lets me just focus on the analysis, and that's where and that's really what the bar graders are looking for. One thing I continuously hammer and talk about is that the bar graders, when they're reading your essays, they're really just spending a few minutes reading them. 2 to 3 minutes is the average that a bar grader spends, and you guys all have been in bar prep for close to about a month now. So I'm sure you're kind of getting into the weeds a bit. You're starting to write all those essays, kind of getting through them, and hopefully you're improving on your organization and your law knowledge. But really now, I think it's a good time, after you've written a certain number of practice essays, to really start focusing on the depth of your analysis. One thing I want to say, because this is something that I've just seen kind of come up a bit, is that for a lot of people, when I we'll talk about, discussing certain issues in organization and all of these things and wanting to fix them. And at the end of the day, what really matters is that you have solid analysis throughout. Often it's hard to see it if you're not well organized, but the one thing I don't want people to focus on is going through and making sure that they have, a really perfectly organized essay and spending so much time perfecting that they're not getting to actually discussing the issues and not really getting to the all of the issues that need to be addressed. So just know that, if you have a bar grader and they're commenting on the lack of organization or something else, and you think that your grade is a result of that, know that, order of priority of issues is really, issue number one is, are you spotting all of the correct issues? So, are you spotting them? 2, are you properly analyzing them? And then, are you organizing it in an effective way such that your grader can see the analysis? Does that all make sense? So you guys can type in the little chat box. So we're switching just to all live stream. So just make sure that, you can always type in if you have a question, you can always feel free to type in the question in that chat box. I do look at that pretty regularly. So, all right. So now I'm going to kind of jump into a little bit of the presentation. Let's see. Okay. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to review structure and pre-writing a little bit. We're going to talk a bit about what the bar examiners expect to see, understand how to connect facts to law. And this is kind of really, I'll give you the formulas. We'll talk about that, know how and when to draw inferences. And then if we have time, we'll talk about self-assessment a bit. All right. All right. So structure, so review. So remember, so last time I talked about organization, just because oftentimes, organizing you have to get organized in order for you to be able to do a proper analysis. You also want to organize and have a good structure to your essays, so that like I just said, and you probably heard me say a million times, just so the organization or just your analysis jumps off the page. You have to organize things in a logical order such that it flows as well. You want to have, different paragraphs. You want to have issue headings, and then you want to have a rule paragraph, an analysis paragraph, and a conclusion paragraph, all broken apart separately. And the reason for that is when you do that, your analysis, when you have a separate paragraph that starts with here, comma, and you're analyzing, then I easily can see that is your analysis, and that's what you want me to pay attention to. mini IRACs for every element, time permitting. Headings for each element, time permitting. And really the reason I say time permitting is because oftentimes you'll have an essay that has so many issues, like, evidence, for example. There are so many issues that you wouldn't have time to do sub-IRACs for everything. Or for example, if you do a torts essay, the July 2010 torts exam is a good example because that when you had to do 2 full-blown negligence analyses in every single intentional tort, you don't have time to do sub-IRACs for everything, so you don't want to worry about that. What you want to do is you want to, make sure that you're spotting all of the issues. After you do that, organize it in a logical manner and allocate time, which may mean that you're going to do single IRACs for some intentional torts and sub-IRAC, the 2 negligence analyses. So, make sure you're organizing in a logical order. You are including lots of headings all over the place. You're separating everything out to the extent possible. You have headings all over the place. As one student said, when in doubt, headline it out. And I'm a really big fan of that. Bar graders are a big fan of that. One of the things that the bar graders have said is that, the bar graders say, we're not archaeologists. We don't want to dig. And when you have separate paragraphs, and really a separate analysis and conclusion paragraph, or, your analysis separate from your rule so that your analysis jumps off the page, that really helps. So you want to definitely do that to the extent possible. Any questions about structure and organization? And I think you guys can actually speak and ask questions too. Okay. So, but at any time, if you have any questions about anything, just always feel free to let me know. One thing too that you'll notice, and I think that you'll want to kind of pay attention to this as you're going through and as you start to dig deeper and deeper into the subjects. You guys have probably all covered a few subjects by now in bar review, and that being the case, you want to look for similarities and distinctions between how to organize different bar essays. So, and I've talked about this. Some of them you're going to have factual headings and then legal headings below that. Oftentimes with contracts, you're going to have factual headings with legal headings below. With evidence, you're going to have a factual heading regarding the piece of evidence. With community property, you're going to have a heading with the community property. What is the piece of property? And then for wills and trusts, you might have, who takes what. So you're going to have name headings for each individual. And then you're going to have legal issue headings below that. And then others like torts, for example, torts, property, PR, you're going to have really legal issue headings. PR, you're going to have duty of loyalty, duty of confidentiality, duty of competence. You're going to have duty of this, duty of that, all over the place. So there's really 2 main ways to organize when it comes to essays. It's either by thing, which is the first category. So with community property, wills and trusts, contracts, quite a bit, evidence, and then there's by legal issue. That's more property, etc. So you want to kind of, when you're doing essays, see, okay, well, how does this fit? Because one thing on the bar exam is, you don't want to have a totally different thing for every single subject. It's easier if you can sort of compartmentalize, how things should be organized. Any questions about that? It's so weird not being in front of a whole classroom. All right. Let's talk about, oops. All right, so again, pre-writing. The first thing you want to do whenever the first essay you see, you want to read the call of the question. After you do, you want to see what subject am I in? As soon as you can identify what subject you're in, you want to create your list A. So that's just your quick little issue checklist. For torts, for example, it may be, negligence, intentional torts, defamation, products liability, you're going to just run through all those kind of big picture topics that you have in every subject. In evidence, you have, relevance, hearsay, impeachment, privileges, just all those sort of big categories. So you want to make sure you have your list A's, and it's really there as something that you have so that when you are reading the fact pattern, you can go through and identify, all right, it's after you read the fact pattern, you can look and you can run through and think, okay, did these facts trigger any of these issues as you run through that checklist. It's not, it's not obviously it's not super detailed. It's just something that's really quick, really simple. And it's really just there because when you start reading essays, it's really easy to get sort of, used to like, oh, this is a negligence essay. And then you'll forget that there's all these intentional torts and other things that might be triggered by the fact pattern. So you want to go through, you want to create that list A, then you're going to actively read the fact pattern. You're actively reading it, so you're marking it up. You're pausing after every sentence and you're saying, why is this fact here? Why is this fact here? Why is this fact here? You're asking yourself those questions. I'm sure you guys have all written at least a few essays by now, I'm hoping. So, you want to actively read that fact pattern and identify, what are the issues that they want me to address. After you do that, then you've actively read the fact pattern. You go through your list A, and you might run through the list and say, okay, well, what issues are actually being tested here? So if it's, if negligence is being tested, you're going to actually write out the elements. You're going to say, duty, and then you're going to have, a sub-element into that, Andrews and Cardozo, okay, standard of care, what are the, reasonably prudent person, and, any special duties. Duty, then you're going to go through breach, you're going to list out the elements there. Causation, you're going to write actual proximate. Damages, and you're gonna write that out. So you're gonna list out all of your elements. You're gonna list out all of the detail for every single issue. So if there's 2 negligence analyses, you're gonna do negligence. You're gonna list out the elements, and then if there's every intentional tort, you're gonna list out the elements for the intentional torts as well. So list B is just a much more detailed list of everything that's being tested in that particular fact pattern. So you're gonna go through that. Then you go through and you read the facts again. So you're reading the fact pattern a second time. So you're going through and you're saying if you identify any other issues, but B, you're really going through to match the facts to the law. You're matching the facts and to every single element that's listed. So that you're thinking through the entire problem as from the start. The reason that we really have you do the pre-write is so that you are thinking about the fact pattern and what are all the legal issues being tested. As you go through it. The thing that you don't want to do, and a lot of people will do this still, is we don't want you to just immediately start typing. And the reason for that, is you get the fact pattern and you're like, oh, this is torts, and you just immediately like, this is negligence, and you immediately start just doing a full-blown negligence analysis, but then you haven't really thought through it. So if you haven't thought through the essay, you're going to miss issues. You're going to be stopping and pausing to think quite a bit throughout. And the problem with that is just that a lot of people want to start typing because it gives them a bit of comfort, especially because you hear everybody else start typing in that room. But the problem with that is that, you're having to stop and pause to think. And when you have to stop and pause to think, more time is going by that you don't necessarily realize. So even though it's scary to spend 15 or 20 minutes at the beginning, thinking through everything, it's, you've probably heard me say this 100 times. If you spend 20 minutes, which is a third of the time, and you've thought through everything, then you still have 40 minutes to write. Even if you're a slow typist, you can write the requisite amount needed to pass the exam. So if you're a slow typer, that's 40 words a minute, or even just average. 40 words a minute is not too tough, and I say that, but maybe it is. But in my experience, that's been pretty manageable for most people, and you can get 1,600 words down. Not that that's the end all be all, but if you can write 1,600 words, that's enough space for you to write to address all the issues that are that the bar examiners want you to discuss. That's not as long as the selected answers are. I think those average like 2,500 words. So those are not, that's not what you're looking for. We're not trying to get you to write one of those. I would love it if one of your answers was selected for the selected answers, but that's not the goal here. The goal is for you to write passing essays. And I've started to see a lot of the essays that people are bringing that they wrote for the bar exam from this July. And I've seen a lot of passing ones that are, 800, 900 words. So the word count is not, it's something that I look at, but it's not the end all be all of anything. So it's good going back to my main point, it's good to outline, to, really go through and pre-write, think through all the issues, identify the weight of all the different issues that are, so that's triaging, identifying the weight of the issue so you know where you need to allocate your time. And I do really encourage you to do this throughout the process of studying for the bar. I know a lot of people kind of fight me on it, but it does truly, truly help when people just sort of succumb to it. It's beneficial. Any questions about that, about the pre-writing process? No? I'll just zoom out. All right, cool. Thanks. All right, so pre-writing. So that's a little review. So analysis. So what you have to do, your whole job on the bar exam, your whole job is to show the reader, not just telling them how you reached your conclusion, right? So it goes back to basics of, elementary school math, right? Show your work. And the grader really doesn't care how many legal rules or how much doctrine you have memorized. What they want to see is that you know how the law works, that you've really internalized that information, that you are thinking about, okay, well, based on these facts, these are all the legal issues, and this is how this could come out. You never, ever, ever want to include a rule that you're not going to analyze. You do need to include rules, and you need to have precise rules. And that's more just because if you don't have a precise rule, your analysis will be incorrect, which is obviously a problem. And it will happen to you on the bar. We know this because we see selected answers that have incorrect analysis and incorrect rules all the time. But you need to do your very best to write really solid rules, really precise rules, because that leads to precise analysis, and that's really what we care about. So they don't care about how many rules you have. They don't care if you know. They don't care if the essay is testing you on, just on negligence. They don't care if you know the rules for intentional torts, if that's not what they're asking you. They want to see that you know what they are testing you on, that you know what legal issues are being presented by the facts, and that you know how to analyze those issues. Like, at the end of the day, that's really all it comes down to, which is, easier said than done. They also want to see that you can, use your own common knowledge to draw reasonable inferences. They really do want to see that you have common sense. This comes up quite a bit. There's a lot of ambiguity that is written into the fact patterns intentionally. Reasonable minds can differ on a lot of things, right? That's why we have plaintiff and defense counsel, because you have the same set of facts, and there might be a different view on how those facts, what the results should be based on those facts. So it's you've got to be able to show that you have that common sense. You can draw those inferences. You can see that there are counter arguments to be made, that you can take a position and support your position with facts and reasoning. So use your common knowledge to draw reasonable inferences. The difference between a fact and an inference is, a fact is something that's objectively true or false. So, what color is my necklace? My necklace is gold. That's objectively true or false because we can look at that and see that that's the case, right? Drawing an inference. So you can draw an inference that, okay, this is probably a fake gold necklace, right? Because A, this thing is kind of thick, and B, it would be ridiculous for me to wear this if this is real, right? You guys can probably all make that, draw that inferences, based on your common knowledge, right? Does that make sense? Maybe you think that I'm a baller and I can afford a crazy gold necklace like this. I can't. So that's that's the distinction between inference, facts and inferences. So we'll talk about that tonight. About 80% of the bar exam is just matching facts to law. So it's just doing straight fact matching. The facts are there just based on the facts alone. It proves that an element is or is not satisfied. But there, oftentimes you will have to draw inferences. Usually that is when you have a rule that has some requirements. So a lot of con law, you're going to have to draw inferences. I think a fair amount of torts, you're going to have to draw inferences. A fair amount of PR, you're going to have to draw inferences. Anytime you have a rule that has a reasonableness requirement, you're going to be drawing an inference. Because you're going to say, okay, well, what would a reasonably prudent person do? A reasonably prudent person would not text and drive, because texting and driving is dangerous, because driving a vehicle is, hitting somebody with a vehicle or getting in a car accident can cause a significant injury, including death. So that's the inference you can draw. So a reasonably prudent person would not do that. And so that you have to draw an inference. So they want to see that you are able to do that, and that you can just match the facts. The facts are critical on every single bar essay. They are there. They're written for a very particular reason. They're written the way that they are for a particular reason most of the time. They do make mistakes, but the bar examiners, but usually they're written in a very specific way. Ambiguity is written into them. They want to see, what do you do when there's ambiguity? How do you grapple with that? Use your common knowledge. It's, I think, imperative that when you're analyzing that you include at least 2 counter arguments per essay. With all the selected answers, we see counter arguments all over the place, but also don't just identify counter arguments. You need to respond to them, and you need to show, what is the better, who has the better position and why. So that's something that's really important. And reasonable minds can absolutely differ. You'll see that if you spend a lot of time looking at the answers. If you spend time looking at the answers, you are at the selected answers for the bar, you will see that a lot of times the two selected answers come to a different conclusion. So does that all make sense? I'll just assume yes. Okay, cool. Thanks, Andrea. All right. So let's see next. All right. So your job, really your job is simply to show how the facts and law work together. So you've got to show which facts are relevant and why. And how do the facts prove or disprove each rule of law is met? What are plausible counter arguments to support other conclusions, and why should one side prevail? So it really is, your sole job on the exam is to show, is to identify why that fact is there. So, the fact is there because it's triggering a certain legal issue. So you need to say, okay, that's you issue spotting, right? So then you have to say, okay, and so say you see that a burglary is happening. So then, okay, why did they say that he opened the window? They said that he opened the window because that constitutes a breaking. So, here, the defendant created an opening into the dwelling because he opened a window, and that's it. That's what you have to show. So the reason they said that he opened the window is to show the breaking element is satisfied. Then it might say, okay, well, the defendant went inside to get money that was owed to him. So that's a little bit ambiguous because did he have the intent to commit a felony if he was just going in to get what was rightfully his, or not? What if he's inside and this is an MBE fact pattern, but what if when he's inside when he's inside, he says, oh, okay, I'm grabbing that money that's owed to me, but I'm also going to grab that painting. Okay, well, then, that did he have the intent to commit a felony at the time that he entered? Well, what if he develops that intent after he enters? So, you're going to have to grapple with those ambiguities. You have to show which facts are relevant and why. You need to use every single fact in an essay. Every single fact is there for a reason, and it's there for you to use. You'd have to identify how do the facts prove or disprove each rule of law. So based on, if facts are there that indicate you need to talk about an assault, but it looks like they were trying to scare someone, but then it ended up that the person didn't see it. Well, if somebody is trying to scare someone, but the victim or the victim doesn't see it, then there wasn't actually an assault because there was no apprehension. But you still need to talk about assault, even though it's not met. So you have to go through and prove and disprove each rule of law, and then come up with plausible counter arguments. So that really is your sole job. So your job is number one, I would say. Number one, your job is to issue spot. You have 8 to 12 issues per bar essay. So number one, you have to spot what issues are they trying to get me to analyze. Number two, you need to know the rules of law so you can analyze them properly. So Andrea asked, so if time permits, attempt a counter argument for every essay. I think you absolutely need to have at least 1 to 2. You need to have at least 1 to 2 counter arguments per essay, and you'll see that the reason I see more and more essays that are doing better, they're grappling with that ambiguity, because as lawyers we always have good facts and bad facts, and you have to deal with that. It's something that good lawyers will know how to deal with every single bad fact, and sometimes you just have to concede that something's bad. And I'm not quite sure. So somebody asked if it's a single fact, if that's okay, if that's better than no facts. You can't analyze without using facts. So you might have a single fact that supports one element, but you don't need to use multiple. Sometimes it's just opening a window, like that's the only fact that shows that there was a breaking. You can't just say there was a breaking and that's conclusory. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So remember, like, job number one on the bar, on the essays, is issue spot. You've got to issue spot. You absolutely have to issue spot. You need to say, okay, these are all the issues you want me to talk about. So, if you're in con law, And, they're not expressly asking you about standing. They don't ask you about ripeness and mootness. But, what it's screaming for you to analyze is, is Commerce Clause. They're screaming for you to analyze Commerce Clause, Supremacy Clause, preemption, and all of those issues that are related to that. You don't, they're not asking you to analyze, ripeness and mootness and standing. General rule of thumb is that the bar examiners do want you to analyze standing, but you don't have to talk about ripeness and mootness. And if you're running out of time and on that CONLA essay, so if you're running out of time on that CONLA essay, the thing that you're going to omit is standing. I mean, I would hope that doesn't happen. But you want to talk about all the stuff that they're really kind of screaming at you to talk about. When you read, and you guys will see this more and more, like identify, like what are the things that they really want me to talk about? I've just seen people get hung up on all these like preliminary issues, and I don't want that to be the case. I want you guys to, for the analysis, analyze the things that they're really asking for. Does that all make sense, right? So, and something to ask yourself if you're running out of time, if you're one of these people that's running out of time, because time management is a really big, it's a huge part of this exam. So if you find that you are running out of time, really focus on all of the meat of it, and ask yourself if you're spending too much time on preliminary issues. That's something that you can. That's the reason I'm talking about this now is like I think people are starting to see this as they start to write essays, and they'll run out of time. And sometimes it's because they're spending time on these preliminary issues. But when we talk about analysis, I want to make sure that you are like priority number one is analyzing all of the major issues. So, all right. Yeah. And then plausible counter arguments. Yeah. You should always have at least one. And it's like, what is like the hardest, like what is the thing that you grappled with the most? When you were writing, like when you had a hard time coming to a conclusion on what issue, that means that you should have a counter argument there. Not something that's super easy or simple, or like, a bad counter argument, we call it the straw man. Like if you just pull one straw, it all falls apart. It's not that. You want to pick, what is the hardest counter argument? What's the hardest thing that you had to deal with? So, at least one, and ideally two counter arguments per essay. So that literally, that is your job. All right. So fact matching. I talked about this a little bit earlier. So fact matching, the facts alone prove the element is met. So if it says, if the facts literally say, Dwight broke into Victoria's home, then like the fact itself that he broke, that satisfies the breaking element. So facts are provably true or false based on what's provided. So like you cannot argue that there was a breaking when they said he broke into. An inference is something that you've got to use where you have to use evidence and reasoning to show that something is met. So I think you guys have probably all heard me say this a ton, but my favorite word in the English language is the word because. So, really, and I think this is on the next slide, it's, buzzword because facts, buzzword because facts, buzzword because facts. That's when you just are doing a straight fact match. That's all you really need to show. It's not the prettiest writing in the world, which I get. But perfection is the enemy of completion on the bar exam. You've got to be able to complete the essays and address all the issues that they want you to address. So use the word because everywhere. Also, the words thus and therefore, those show that you have a conclusion. You can also use, instead, if you don't like using because every single time, you can use the words so or since. If you are you're drawing an inference, you'll use the words which demonstrates or which suggests. So favorite words are because. Those of you that have seen, essays, answers that I've written, it's all over the place. And I always, whenever there's a stop IRAC, I use the word thus to show my conclusion as to that element, and I use the word accordingly or therefore when I'm talking about a specific claim. So it's just writing for the bar is very formulaic. The analysis is somewhat formulaic, and you don't really want to have to think about the writing process because you want to you're thinking really about the facts. That's the most important thing. I was thinking about, okay, what legal issues are triggered by these facts, and how do these facts show that something is or is not met? So that's really where you've got to spend kind of the crux of your time. You have to let the facts drive you. There's no kind of cookie cutter way to analyze essays on the bar. The facts, the fact patterns are different each time, and you've just got to be familiar with it. That being said, a really good thing to do is to read past bar essays. Do you guys all have the code for baressays.com? If you don't, I'm going to give it to you right now. It's TJSL 2019. So if you go to baressays.com and you sign up for an account, you use that code and you get free access to their basic subscription. You don't get the premium one. I don't think you guys need the premium one. But there's the code so that you have it. And when you go onto baressays.com, there is a list that you can download that I think also I will have my TA Beniza will probably print copies of, but it's just like prior issues tested, and it gives you a little bit of it gives you a little summary, a synopsis of each bar essay and what issues were tested. So it's a good idea for you to take, as you go to bed at night or whatever, or if you're tired at the end of the day. Yeah, no problem. When you're tired at the end of the day, what I suggest doing as a good practice is just to do some issue spotting drills. And to do that, you'll take a random bar essay and you'll go through and you might just do a pre-write on it, spot all the issues, spot all the issues, write out the elements, your conclusions, where you have a counter argument. And then you could take the list that's posted to baressays.com that has that little synopsis, and I'll make sure that some get printed. And and then they will all be kind of housed at those desks that are outside of where my office was. So it's near Professor Matsumoto and Professor Israel and Professor Berger. So I'll have copies of those for you guys. And I think I can post it to the Twin page actually as well. But, do the issue spotting. You want to work kind of on that issue spotting, see how you want to think as little about how to write the analysis, and you want to think about, how the changes in the facts drive what you need to discuss and how you analyze. So we want the goal here is to simplify your analysis or simplify what you have to think about in terms of writing your analysis. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, cool. Good. All right. So to do that, I like to use formulas. So my favorite formula for writing for the bar is here, comma, buzzwords because legally significant facts. So what are the buzzwords from the rule? So what are the terms of art from the rule, right? So I always use burglary because I could probably do it in my sleep. So, with each of the different elements. So the nighttime element for burglary, which I know is eliminated under the modern law, but, my rule would be here. Make it simple. So the rule for the nighttime element, I can tell you the rule for burglary is breaking and entering the dwelling house of another at night with intent to commit a felony therein. So there's 6 different elements there. So for the nighttime element, it's nighttime when it's too dark outside to see a face, right? So the buzzwords from that rule are too dark outside to see a face. So, and say the fact pattern says, say it says it was, 11 p.m. So I'd say here it was too dark outside to see a face because it was 11 p.m. Or it might just actually say it was, when it was pitch black outside. So it could say here it was too dark outside to see a face because it was pitch black outside. So that's literally all you do. And like 80% of the bar is doing that. A lot of evidence you're doing this, like I would say most of evidence you're doing this, except for a few things. But that's most of what you're going to do. And it's really that word because. A lot of times what people will do, and this is really like, you want to simplify your analysis. So a lot of times what I see people do is they'll state a fact and they'll state a conclusion. And they don't make the connection between the two. And then that does 2 things. So one, you're forcing the reader to make the connection, and you're also writing more than you need to, which takes extra time. So people say like here it was, they'll just say, here it was pitch black outside, and then they'll say thus it was nighttime, and that's incorrect because you're not showing it. So I'm saying, okay, well, because it's pitch black outside, that means it's nighttime. So I have to make that connection in my head when I need to see that that. And that you're making that connection. So it's really kind of spelling things out really simply, which is a hard thing to do because you're taking complex concepts and you're trying to write them in a simple manner in a timed environment on a test that is difficult. So it's hard to do, but just remember it's here, comma, buzzwords because legally significant facts. That's really all you have to do for most of the exam. So here's an example. So And I, of course, went a little bit above. But, like, let's say, under the common law, the burglary must occur at night. It is nighttime when it's too dark outside to see a face. So Dwight broke into Victoria's house at 11 p.m. So here it was too dark outside to see a face because Dwight broke into Victoria's house at 11 p.m. And then I had this example, and I think you can stop at 11 p.m. But I say which is nighttime in nearly every jurisdiction in the United States. But, because if you're in some portions of the world, at 11 p.m. it's still light out. But really all you need to say is that, or it might, if the fact says, it was pitch black outside, you say here it was too dark outside to see a face because it was pitch black outside, and that's it. That's all you have to do. So it's simple. You can also do Formula 2. I always do Formula 1. That's literally, and I catch myself, like, when I'm writing answers to things, like, I catch myself not doing it, and I'll have to go back, like, here, buzzwords because facts. And it's just a way to make sure that you're actually proving the element, your analysis is complete. Because if you don't, you'll think you're saying something and you're not actually saying it. But you can also use this one here, and it's basically just, flipping it around a little bit. But because legally significant facts, buzzwords, is or is not satisfied. It's basically the same thing. This one kind of wraps the conclusion into it. I like the conclusion being broken out, but this is another option. Some people like this phrasing better. So it's really just up to you. So I think I have an example. So to be liable for felony murder, the defendant must have committed an inherently dangerous felony. Do you guys know what the inherently dangerous felonies are? Or what the mnemonic is? Yeah, BARC. Burglary, arson, robbery, rape, kidnapping. Yeah. Usually it's going to be burglary, robbery. They just did kidnapping recently. They did attempted kidnapping. That was done recently, but it wasn't with a murder. It's the BARC offenses. That's what they test when they test felony murder. They do it with those, and they haven't done in terms of crim. Crim pro has been tested somewhat recently, and crim attempted kidnapping was tested, I think, a year ago. But they haven't tested, they haven't done a homicide essay in a long time. So, not that I'm making predictions, just saying what hasn't been done. So here we have to be liable for felony murder. The defendant must have committed an inherently dangerous felony. Burglary is an inherently dangerous felony. So that's my rule. So Dennis committed burglary and Victoria died in the commission of the burglary. So I have, because Dennis committed burglary, Dennis committed an inherently dangerous felony, and the settlement is satisfied. So that's just an example of how that particular formula works. Any questions about that? So this actually came up earlier. So mayhem, I've actually seen debate on this issue. In terms of the bar, unless that's something that's been added very recently that I'm not aware of. But apparently I think Barbary is telling people that, mayhem has also been added to this, so I think you can consider it one. My criminal law midterm when I was in law school, granted that was years ago now, but we had to analyze mayhem as an inherently dangerous felony because there's inherently dangerous in the abstract and inherently dangerous as committed, which some of you might recall. So I think that one can kind of go either way. But I think if you saw one that was mayhem, you can actually add that too. Mayhem is just disfigurement of someone, essentially. So that's what that is. But yeah, I've had that question recently. All right, so that fact matching, that's really all you have to do. So we're going to do a little bit of practice with that. I think we'll practice both of these together in a little bit. Fact matching and also inferential reasoning. All right. This will work. All right, and inference. So it's a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. So this you have to explain something. So you'd have here insert legally significant facts, which suggests that, and whatever the logical conclusion is, which is the logical conclusion is that it's usually going to be tied to your buzzwords, and then because reasoning. So therefore, then you have your conclusion. So it's like this. Oops. So here, this is my favorite easy little example. So defendant commits burglary, breaks and enters the dwelling house of another at night with the intent to commit a felony therein. So again, the nighttime element is satisfied when it is too dark outside to see a face. So the fact here is Dwight used a flashlight to locate the back door of Victoria's house. So somebody tell me, when do people use flashlights? To see in the dark, yeah, when it's dark outside, right? Because people generally don't use flashlights unless it's dark outside. Yeah. Right, exactly. So everybody's got that. So this is like my nice, easy example. So here, Dwight used a flashlight so he could find the back door of Victoria's house, which suggests it was too dark outside to see a face. Because so what I want you guys to because people generally don't use flashlights unless it's dark outside. Therefore, the nighttime element is met. So it's just that the inference from using a flashlight is that it was dark, and the reason for that is because people generally don't use flashlights unless it's dark outside. Same thing. This is just like I have two formulas for fact matching. I have two formulas for drawing inferences. So here's another one. So generally, insert common knowledge. So generally people don't use a flashlight unless it's dark outside. Here, here Dwight used a flashlight to find the back door of Victoria's house, which suggests it was dark outside because, again, people don't generally use a flashlight unless it's dark. This one I find a little bit more repetitive, which you probably just heard when I said it. But it's, again, we like to provide another option just so that, some people everybody has preferences. I like one thing, somebody might like something else. Any questions about that? All right, good. There's an example. All right, so now I've just talked at all of you for a while. So now what I want you to do is we have posted we'll use the ConLaw essay. It's a ConLaw essay that's posted to the Twin page, and it is, which one is it? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second here. Okay. So yeah, it's ConLaw Essay 1. So it's for many years Old Ways Fellowship. So, okay. All right, so we're using this fact pattern. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to go ahead and read this. Let's say I'll give you until 7 p.m. just so you can read it, and I want you to kind of go through that pre-writing process and read the call to question, outline it, and then we're gonna do some practice with it. All right, you guys all ready? Okay, I figured. I just like to give ample time. So now, so you guys have all gone through, and most of you have probably seen this essay before. It's one I use quite a bit. Um, but if you go to the Twin page and download, I think it's just like Con Law essay shell, something like along those lines. It's a Word document. It's the only Word document posted. In the materials for tonight, I have posted an outline for this essay, and I have all of the rules, things, everything identified there. And so what I want to work on is identifying where do you need to do just a straight fact match, where do the facts prove the law, and then and then also drawing some inferences. So just on the note of con law really quickly, and I will have a con law workshop later in this in the bar cycle. But a lot of people, don't think that it is going to be tested on the bar since it's been tested twice recently. So it's been tested on the last 2 bar exams, and I just don't. Not that I think that it's likely, but I just don't think that it is a good idea to rely on that in terms of identifying, where you spend your time. In the week leading up to the exam, I think, you probably don't need to focus heavily on con law essays, but just, in terms of throughout the bar cycle, I do still think you need to allocate a good amount of time to practicing con law, especially because it's a subject that so many people struggle with. So that's all. All right, but so standing is basically just matching facts to law. So here, can you guys all see my screen? And I'm going to be editing this, and I'll just do buzzwords because fact. So let's see. Okay. So here, so for injury and fact, so it has been or will be. So that I'm going to highlight here the buzzwords. So has been directly and personally injured. So those are my buzzwords that I need to use. So I want to do, so if I'm doing buzzwords because facts, so I'm going to show here, so we're going to talk about our plaintiff here, the old ways ship has been directly and personally injured because, and then I want to, so what happened here? Because, by because the municipal government, it says here, the municipal government building, based on the new policy, the building authority denied the Old Ways Fellowship a permit for the sun display because the building authority denied Old Ways a permit. What does it say? For the sun display. So here we have personally and directly injured. So here are my buzzwords, and then here are my facts. So it's just buzzwords because facts, that's it. So it's super simple. So thus, there is injury in fact. So then my conclusion here ties to my heading. So I have buzzwords here in the analysis and in the rule, and then because, and then I have the facts. So why don't you guys write the one for causation? I'll give you guys a second to go ahead and do that. All right, did you guys write it? So then write what you wrote in the chat box so I can see what you wrote. So what are the buzzwords here? So causal connection, it's really kind of the whole rule. Causal connection between the injury and the conduct complained of. So you say here, buzzwords here, there is a causal. So what fact? So if you guys are writing it in there, I'll let you finish it. Yeah, exactly. I think Andrea, that's good. So here there's a causal connection. Injury in the contemplative because you denied the old ways of permit. Yeah, exactly. So denied, and in the complaint, and denied the permit. I think also what you can say is there is a causal connection between the injury and the conduct complained of. If the conduct complained of is really the policy, and denying it based on that. So I would probably incorporate that fact also. So I would say here there's a causal connection between the injury and the conduct complained. Uh, Andrea and Erica are both really type fasters, and the conduct complained of because the injury is the denial of the permit because the old ways. Well, I don't want to write passively because the building authority denied old ways its permit and due to the new policy. So the thing that I have in here that I don't think other people necessarily had is so the injury is the denial of the permit, and the conduct complained of is the new policy. So they're essentially old ways of saying that is an unconstitutional policy. So that's what's going on. So let's say thus there is causation, and that's it. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Good. But good. Those are good for those of you that wrote them in. I'm assuming everybody else had ones that were beautiful and identical to those, so that's good. All right, so let's have you practice it just one more time. So redressability. So a decision in the litigant's favor, i.e. a decision that this policy is unconstitutional, would be capable of relieving the grievance. So here, I want you to do the buzzwords because facts. So I'm going to give you guys a minute, and then just type it in the chat box when you're done. Yeah, I think that's good. Because the court what other people get? Let's see. Yeah. Found me so we require permit. Yeah, Erica, I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect. Andrew, I think yours is succinct to the point. I think it's not as specific as it could be. Not critical. Not critical in a standing analysis, but still. Kara, that's good too. Good. So those are good examples. So you just want to do, here, buzzwords because facts, over and over. And you're going to do that throughout. But now let's do the inferential reasoning part. So this essay, there were a lot of issues. We had standing. It's really a freedom of speech. It's a First Amendment issue, or a First Amendment essay predominantly. So there was, when you have First Amendment, you're going to go through, we call it like the Four Horsemen, vagueness, overbreath, unfettered discretion, and oh God, I always forget the fourth one. Somebody tell me. Unfettered discretion, and I can think of it, but it's just not coming. The words aren't coming out of my mouth. Where you have to prevent speech before it happens. I just can't think of what the actual term is. So you have those, and then you go through content-based versus content-neutral. Prior restraint, yes, thank you, Erica. I was thinking it started with an A, but it's ain't. But yeah, prior restraint. Content-based versus content-neutral. So there's that. The thing that I thought we could talk about with respect to, actually, where is it? It is First reducibility, First Amendment. So where you have to draw an inference on this one is, I think, in it is with sect preference. So sect preference is just another First Amendment issue. You know, a government action that prefers one religious sect over another. So here, what facts tell us that there is a sect preference happening here? You type it in. What symbol did the attorney say was non-religious? Yeah, so it's the Christmas tree. Yeah, so I think you know, when you have the Christmas tree, so why is it that a Christmas tree? What does a Christmas tree symbolize? What's the argument that it symbolizes? Yeah, Christmas, right? And Christmas is, you know, yeah, it can be viewed as a secular, i.e., non-religious symbol, but yeah, but it's really, it's, you know, Catholic or a Christian holiday, so that, which is religious, right? So so I think what you can do here is, so you'd want to draw an inference. So here you have to draw an inference that the Christmas tree is government action that is preferring one religious sect over another. So here you'd want to use that formula here. Let me get the formula up. The one that I like. So here, insert legally significant facts, which suggests, and then state the logical conclusion and state why. So here, so our legally significant facts are that legally significant facts are that that the building authority city really treats Christmas trees as secular symbols rather than religious symbols. So here, we would say here, building authority or city treats Christmas trees as secular symbols rather than religious symbols, which suggests that, and what's the logical conclusion? The logical conclusion is that it prefers Christianity over other religions, and why? So I want you guys to write that out. I want you to, or I'll write this one out and then I'll give you guys another one. So, so here, city, because it's city building authority, so I'm just going to refer to them as city. Here, city finds that, or finds are secular rather than religious, which suggests it prefers Christianity over other. So it does say, it says, it doesn't say courts. So Erica, that's a really good question. That courts treat Christmas trees. Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry. By council, that courts treat Christmas trees as secular symbols. I was just building authority decided to erect a Christmas tree in the lobby. It's so. Let's see. So the ambiguity with this one. After it was formed by council, that courts treat Christmas trees as secular symbols rather than religious symbols. I think so. The significance here is still like the courts can be. I mean, I guess the courts can be doing. It said BA put a tree because of the court's decision. Yeah. City finds for Christianity. City fine because rather than religious stuff, which suggests. I mean, I think that what you can say is still is that, you know, that the courts may be incorrect here too. So it's still just that there is a finding that Christmas trees are secular rather than religious, and I think that you can still make this argument. So courts found Christmas trees secular rather than religious, which suggests and it's still deciding to put it up with just a preference. Building authority is still deciding to put it up. Preference for Christianity over other religions. Because Christmas trees symbolize are strongly associated with Christianity. Yeah. Does that make sense, Erica and everybody? Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I still think like, yeah, it is the court's decision, but at the end of the day, like they don't, it's not a definitive ruling overall. So I think, and it's interesting, nobody's actually pointed that out before, but yeah, it's, I think that you still, they found that building authority is still doing that, and I still think, you know, when you are saying that other groups can't display it, but this one can just because of this basis, which is a good basis. So because the courts find that, I still think that you can find that there is a sect preference. There's your drawing your inference. You have to explain why, and you have to say, okay, well, and it might be kind of obvious because, you know, Christmas trees are, you know, a lot of people won't necessarily spell that out, but you do need to spell it out rather than having your grader do it. So let's take another, that because it's BA's policy and discretion instead of the courts. Yeah, I think that yeah, exactly. You could say it's BA's policy, so BA is deciding to do that. So courts have found that it's a secular symbol, but BA has this policy. Yeah, I think that's good. And I think that that's going to come up, Erica, really with a counter argument too. So when you're talking about this, and then you're presenting the counter argument that, you know, okay, well, this is the court's decision, not building authorities, but BA has this policy. They're denying it to other people, so it looks as though, okay, well, they're taking this finding and choosing it to prefer one religion over another. But yeah, that's really good. So, all right, now I want you guys to do another one. Content-based versus content neutral. So let's see. So do it for vagueness. So what terms in this policy do you think could be construed as vague? So the policy here is that religious displays and symbols are not permitted in any government building. So that's really the policy. That's what they're restricting. So here, I think there's an argument to be made that religious displays and symbol is a vague term because who knows what that means? You know, is a stocking a religious display or symbol, or is it not? Because a stocking is generally, you know, and why could that be? So I want you guys to write using the inference formula for vagueness. So the buzzwords here, if it fails to give reasonableness of what is prohibited, and then I can put the formula back up here. So, and where it says the logical conclusion, your logical conclusion is tied into your buzzwords. Yeah. Okay, Andrea. All right, cool. So, Kara, I want you to give a little bit more reasoning. Kara and Andrea, a little bit more reasoning. So, Andrea, you do it. Religious symbols without describing what constitutes a religious symbol. Yeah, more specific. So here, the statute or the policy covers all religious displays and symbols, which, and then I'll make sure I'm doing it exactly right, which suggests reasonable people to give people, not reasonable people, fails to give people reasonable notice of what is prohibited because, and then you want to explain why. Yeah, so policy fails to give people reasonable notice of what is prohibited because you could say, it doesn't describe what constitutes a religious symbol, because what constitutes a religious symbol, I think what you guys said, because it doesn't describe or give examples of what is a religious symbol, because many symbols may be, or you can say many symbols may be religious to one person and not to another. I mean, you could say really a lot of different things of what it means by religious symbols would not have reasonable notice because there's a lack of a limit on what is included. So such as a sun or a tree. Yeah, Kara, I think that's good. I think you're probably writing a little bit more, but yeah, I think a little bit more than necessary, I should say. But many symbols may be religious to one person and not to another because it fails to give examples of what is religious and what is not. It fails to give any sort of guideline as to what may be prohibited and what is not. So yeah, I think any of those things, I think you can kind of go broadly here, as long as you sound in all of your examples. Yes, Kara. So Lori, so that's a little bit circular. What is meant is not clear. So yeah, why isn't it clear? And I think, to me, the reason one, I think, okay, well, why is it vague? It's because one person might think something is religious and one might not. So if I think of like a stocking, right? A stocking is traditionally associated with Christmas. So is that a Christmas symbol? Maybe, right? But maybe yes, maybe not. But some people don't, might not necessarily. That could be associated with other holidays as well. So I think that is why. So you want to kind of get to the root of it as well. But I think all of you, what you've written, I think is good. A lack of, limit on what is noticed. I think, a lack of examples. Leandria, what you wrote doesn't describe what constitutes a religious symbol. Oftentimes, in statutes, this is why they give examples, is so that they're not held to be unconstitutionally vague. So if you always think about the policy behind things, right? Why do we have this rule for vagueness? It's because you don't want to hinder speech. So if you think about that, what happens if it's too vague? That means people aren't going to talk or aren't going to do things when they are allowed to do it. Does that all make sense? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right, good. All right. What another one? I mean, we can do another example. Let's see. Defined standards. I think defined it. So why don't you guys write one for unfettered discretion? So a regulation cannot give officials broad discretion over speech. There must be defined standards for applying the law. So I think that it's that there really aren't defined standards here, but I want you guys to explain why there are not defined standards. Sorry about that. I'm trying to turn my notifications off. might not be the best one. I think you can draw an inference, but this one you could probably just get away with it doing a fact match as well. Oh, here, I'll put it back up on the screen. But yeah, Lori, that's that is, you're correct. You're off to a good start, I'll say. Actually, if you use the fact, yeah, exactly. So, Laura, I think that's good because it elucidates what is not permitted, does not state what should be done in the event one violates the statute. I think that's okay. So I think there where you're going is a little bit different. Unfettered discretion is like discretion as to, you're talking about the punishment where unfettered discretion is deciding who does and does not violate it, not what happens in the event that one does violate the statute. So like what I'm saying, so like how it differs here is that and the fact that I'm using is that the building authority erected a Christmas tree. And, I know that the courts have said that that's okay, but it demonstrates that there's no defined standards because a court can decide that a Christmas tree is secular and a sun symbol is religious, or vice versa, when each thing might be secular or non-religious. So, tree is closely tied to religion, but considered non-religious. But but a sun, which is traditionally not religious, is being considered religious. So you can, there's no defined standards, and you could also just say, because there are no examples of what is and is not secular. So something like that. You could keep it simple. But the fact here is that they've erected a Christmas tree, which suggests that there's no defined standards because that is traditionally a religious symbol. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, good. And then Adam, I will answer your question separately. So unfettered discretion. So unfettered discretion, really what it means, just getting into the substance of it, is that, to me here when I read this is, so the court here, it looks like they can determine, they've determined that a Christmas tree is secular. But we know that, like we said earlier, that that's something that is generally speaking, closely tied to religion. So it looks as though there's no defined standards for applying the law because, because a traditionally religious symbol is being considered secular, yet a sun, which is traditionally non-secular, is being considered religious. So that's why. So you have a sun and a Christmas tree, and it seems as though they're kind of occupying each other's not gambit, but one is being considered religious when it doesn't necessarily seem that way, and vice versa. All right, any questions about that? So another example of just drawing inferences, just because common law I guess can be a little bit more challenging, but somewhere where it is where you generally need to do it. So let's talk about the reasonably prudent person standard. You will pretty much always, and it's like I said earlier, you'll pretty much always need to draw an inference where there is a reasonableness requirement. So if it's reasonableness in PR, if there's reasonably prudent person. So so if we're talking about the standard of care, so you need to explain why something is considered reasonable. So so if we have the example of texting and driving, so why do we have that law? Yeah, protection. So it's for safety, right? Yeah, safety concerns. Yeah, people can't multitask. That's true too. Protection. So what happens is so people can't. So a reasonably prudent person would not text and drive because texting and driving can lead to a car accident, which can lead to grave concerns or grave injuries. So something like that. So you need to explain that. So anytime you see reasonableness, so why would a reasonably prudent person do something or not do something? So anytime you see that word reasonableness, if something is that's kind of your cue. Oftentimes, what would a reasonably prudent attorney do? What is, if you look at the duty of competence, what would acting with the requisite skill, thoroughness, and preparation, what does that consist of? If somebody fails to respond to discovery, are they acting as a reasonably prudent attorney would do? And you could say no. They're not acting with the skill, thoroughness, and preparation because any attorney would respond to discovery in a timely manner so as to not prejudice his or her client. So you have to kind of go through each of those. Anytime you see, I think it comes up a lot in PR, a lot of torts, etc., where you need to draw an inference. But just remember, most of the time you will be able to just do, straight fact, matching the fact to the law. All right. Does anybody have any questions in terms just, A, general bar questions, B, and I think I can turn your microphones on. If you guys have any questions at all at this point. Nope. Okay. If you do, feel free. You can reach out to Professors Matsumoto, Berger, and Israel. I will have the schedule. The calendar is up there. The calendar is up there, and I think okay. Kara, I'll answer that. So actually, this is a good question. How do you know if you're not being specific enough in terms of your analysis? So that is, you want to compare yourself to selected answers, compare yourself to model answers that you might have. And also just bring your essays in to Professors Matsumoto, Berger, and Israel. Have them look at what you're writing in your analysis, and is it complete enough? Are you being thorough enough? I think that's doing a good self-assessment is important, but also getting going in and having appointments with the professors is also really helpful. So if you have a question about that in particular, that's what I would do. And right now at the beginning, you guys still have 2 months. You really kind of want to be critical of your writing. And not that you aren't already, I know that people are, but really take it as the opportunity to dig deeper and really strengthen, the quality of your analysis so that, when February, later on in a few weeks, you're focusing more on, you've got your analysis and how to do it down. And it's just a matter of, all right, let me do, lots of practice and it's refining skills. So make sure that, as you're going through that you're spending a lot of time memorizing the law. So you want to make sure that you do know all the rules. I think right now is when you want to kind of get into the nitty gritty and get into the details. Make sure that you understand all of the rules. And this is when you want to be identifying any gaps in law knowledge that you may have, because there's still a ton of time to learn. and you don't want to be, identifying a knowledge gap, the week before the exam. You want to just be really focusing. So, all right, that's all. So generally speaking, the workshops, they do go longer. These ones where it's like just strictly skill based, where we're not doing a lot of practice. These ones tend to be a little bit shorter. So yeah, I expected it to be done around 7:45 tonight. But any ones that are subject matter specific, those do tend to go a little bit longer. I am recording all of them as well. The recording doesn't always work, but obviously I do my best. It's been recording the whole time, so it's a matter of it transferring. And then if you guys have any questions, just feel free to send us an email. All right, that's it. Thanks, guys. Good night.